All right, and a bit of surprising news last week, Thursday. We had the announcement of Nebraska hiring their new defensive coordinator under Matt Rhule, and that is going out and getting Syracuse's Tony White. Now, White was not a name that was very common in this search. I think most people maybe wanted Jim Leonard. I was one of those guys that's like, all right, Rhule, go out and get Jim Leonard. He's not going to be the coach at the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. Glenn Schumann from Georgia was the other one, their co-defensive coordinator. And I think those were the two names. A lot of people maybe thought Phil Snow would be potentially the defensive coordinator because he had been with Matt Rhule at multiple stops. And the longer this goes, maybe that was the fallback. So it was a bit of a surprise because, like I said, Tony White from Syracuse was not a name. And it was, a lot because, Rhule is bringing in guys he had been associated with. And Tony White had not coached with Matt Rhule prior. But if we look back at their histories, they did cross paths at UCLA when Tony White was a linebacker there. Matt Rhule was the defensive line coach. So I'm sure they've interacted. They knew each other from back then, and I'm sure just coaching had some connections. So another surprise here was that not only was Tony White a name that no one had really heard of coming in to be the defensive coordinator, but that they were going to run the 3-3-5 defense. And a lot of people had thought, would they stick with the 3-4? Would they go back to the 4-3? Hayden Moore, a linebacker recruit, had mentioned that Rhule told him that he was favoring a 4-3 defense. So this kind of caught us off guard. And me, biasly, I was never a big fan of the 3-3-5. I always viewed it as a gimmick defense to stop the spread offense. I always envisioned Rich Rodriguez's 3-3-5 defenses to kind of go with his spread offense. And I just had a lot of bias against it. And I thought, and so when they said he's bringing the 3-3-5 defense, I'm like, it's built on small, quick speed, which is good. But when you're playing in the Big Ten, and you're playing Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, how is that going to hold up? Or we saw when Pelini came in with that 4-2-5 peso, a lot of small, undersized guys built to go against the Big 12 spread, he kind of struggled against those more physical teams. So that was my concern. And so what I did is I dove into the tape. And to learn more about the 3-3-5 defense, to learn more about Tony White's defense, to look to see what Matt Rhule did at both Temple and Baylor. And I'm more optimistic, and I'm actually kind of excited for what we could potentially see. So let's get into it real quick. Let's look at what Nebraska's defense could look like in Matt Rhule's tenure with Tony White as the defensive coordinator. So it's one thing to kind of go back and look at Temple and Baylor and all of that. I think the focus I want to have with this is what Tony White did at Syracuse. And I went back and watched some tape of their game, especially against Clemson. I got to see them face off a couple years ago against Trevor Lawrence's Clemson team, a team that went to the college football playoff. And Syracuse held their own. And I really like a lot of what Tony White did in that game with his 3-3-5. As I said, I was biased against the 3-3-5 going in. And the more I watched of what Syracuse did against a good Clemson offense, really kind of turned my thought process around. Now, like I said, 3-3-5 defense. But at Syracuse, he had his front line, his three-man front. The nose tackle was 6'4", 285 pounds. The defensive end was 6'3", 290 pounds, and the other defensive end was 6'1", 285. So you almost had, your nose, kind of more of a D tackle, and then more of a DN. And what I liked about that is then at linebacker, they had a lot of guys around 6'1", 220, 230 pounds, and they were fast, physical. And at Syracuse, they moved those guys around a ton. They didn't just sit there and, 3 down linemen, 3 stacked linebackers and go. They really moved those guys, shifted them around. I mean, on the first play of the game, they gave them 3 different looks. They set up in a 5-1. Five, 3 down linemen, 2 outside linebackers up, middle linebacker, and then the linebackers drop back into a 3-3 look, and then the strong safety came up. And a lot of that movement pre-snap can really confuse the offensive line. Like, who are you going to block? You see it there. Quickly they shift here, then they shift there, and you're like scrambling around. Okay, I think I got that guy. Oh, wait, no, I got that guy. And that leaves more free runners, in my opinion. I like that Syracuse played a lot of games with their defensive line. They'd have the defensive end slant to his left, a linebacker come curling or looping around him, another defensive tackle too. It reminded me a lot of what Mike Vrabel's doing at Tennessee with the Titans. And the Titans have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and they've got really a couple decent defensive linemen. Jeffrey Simmons is a stud. Deco Autry's a good player. They've got it, but other than that, and they're moving, and they create a lot of confusion and running lanes for their defenders to create opens. And I saw a lot of that in Syracuse. On passing downs, they'd bring in guys. So Steve Linton was a defensive end for Syracuse that year, 6'5", 225 pounds. They'd bring him in on passing situations, line him up as one of their defensive ends, and that gives them more of an athletic guy. We think of guys like O'Shawn Mathis, Garrett Nelson. You can kind of still have those guys in this defense. Okay, they played a lot of. They mixed up their coverages. I would say they were more zone-based in their coverages. They play a lot of too high with kind of 5 linebackers and their cornerbacks underneath. They did, once again, run a 3 safety approach. Their 2 outside safeties were more like free safeties. The middle guy was more of a rover. But then what I like with what Tony White did is he'd rotate guys in. You would have a guy as your rover, their starting guy. He was 6'4", 215 pounds. But then in certain situations, they take him off, and it's almost like they have 3 free safeties, and it allows them to do a lot more with their coverages, and they could rotate those guys. But they rotated in a lot of different guys. They had a lot of guys on their defensive line that were 6'4" and taller, that were around that 260 to 280 range. Their linebackers flew around. One thing I noticed with Syracuse's linebackers is they got off blocks really well. So I think that's key. You're kind of putting those linebackers into roles to fill gaps. And so you really have to be able to stack and shed and to get off blocks. They just moved around, showed lots of different fronts. They would run, they'd run some traditional stack, 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers. They'd bring their outside linebackers up, and then they're in a 5-1. They'd bring one of them up, and they just gave different looks. So you need versatile linebackers, guys that can rush off the edge, that can drop into coverage, that can play a traditional linebacker spot. But I could also see them having that middle linebacker be more of a thumper and be a downhill player. And I think seeing what we see from Tony White at Syracuse, seeing what Matt Rhule ran at Baylor and Temple, I think you're going to see a merging of those schemes. And it's nice because you've got similar philosophies. I think Nebraska's going to have a bigger defensive line. We saw that with what Rhule did at Temple. And you're going to get bigger guys in Nebraska than you are Syracuse. So I think we're going to see a traditional, what Nebraska's run as a 3-4 defense under Shenander, those type of defensive linemen, you're still going to get those guys. So I think our front's going to look very similar, the type of players that we recruit. I think you're going to see more of maybe a bigger nose. So I think a guy like Nash Hutchmeyer would be a good fit and is going to play a lot more. I think you're going to see guys like Ty Robinson at defensive end. I think where we're going to see a change over time is those linebackers. They're going to get guys that can fly around and do different things. I can see them maybe getting, like I said, that thumper in at middle linebacker, and then having those 2 outside guys fly around a little bit more. But I think, Luke Reimer's going to fit really well in this defense. I think Nick Henrich, I think he could play a good spot in that outside linebacker because he can come up and rush off the edge. I think Isaac Gifford's a guy that can kind of play that rover position. I think they usually play just 2 corners, but I think Hartzog and Quentin Newsome are going to fit well with what they do here. And so Nebraska's got a lot of pieces. If they can still keep those guys here in on the, not get them in the transfer portal, I think Nebraska's defense has a chance to really fit well within this defense. Now, you need more defensive linemen. You've got, I think Hutchmeyer is better than what he's shown. I think Ty Robinson, it can really thrive in this, but you need a couple more guys. And I'm really optimistic. I think it's going to be a lot more of a 3-4 look in essence, maybe some 4-2-5, especially if they get a good edge rusher. Maybe this year with Garrett Nelson, they run more of a 4-2-5, and Garrett Nelson's kind of that walk-up linebacker. And then you just play the 2 guys back and evolve as they're able to recruit and get guys in. But like I said, I was not very excited at the notion of a 3-3-5, but seeing what Tony White's done at Syracuse, seeing what Matt Rhule has done at Baylor and Temple, I think this is really going to fit well. And I think, yes, you're going to face physical teams like Michigan, Iowa, Minnesota, but I think getting the Big Ten players in and running this scheme with the players that they want to get, I think this defense has a chance to really improve. And like I said, Tony White came in. He's an up-and-coming coach. He's a guy that had coordinator offers at other places. He had head coaching opportunities at the lower levels. And he is coming to Nebraska with the goal to turn around this defense and parlay that into a better head coaching job. And you may say, oh, I want someone to be here longer. But if he's going to get a head coaching job based off of what he did at Nebraska, that means he's turned Nebraska's defense back into what we want it to be, and it's set up for somebody else to come up and take his spot and keep it going. So that's what I think Nebraska's defense is going to look like. I'm optimistic. I'm excited for it. I can't wait to see the players that they're bringing in. They're recruiting a lot of linebackers that kind of fit this. The defensive linemen that they're recruiting really kind of fit what we're seeing. So let's get those guys in there, and I can't wait to see it unfold. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Remember, the best way to get more videos like this is to subscribe. Hit the bell for hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell for notifications. While you're out there, continue to follow me on social media, draft_Brian, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it may be, draft_Brian. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Until next time.